The sun had barely cleared the eastern ridgeline when Maya arrived at the hangar the next morning. The air was cold and sharp, carrying the smell of aviation fuel and distant sage. She liked this time of day. Before the noise. Before the egos. She ran her pre-flight inspection alone, moving around the Black Hawk with practiced precision. Every panel, every bolt, every hydraulic line. She traced her fingers along the fuselage like someone reading braille, checking for imperfections that existed only in her mind. "You know the mechanics already did that, right?" A voice called from across the tarmac. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, one of the few female pilots in the squadron, approached with 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Maya with a sympathetic smile. "Old habits," Maya said quietly, accepting the cup. "Or new paranoia?" Kim leaned against the helicopter, studying Maya carefully. "You don't talk about where you flew before this, do you?" "Not much to talk about." "Bullshit." Kim said it, without malice, just stating a fact. "I've seen how you fly. That's not training base experience. That's—" She trailed off, searching for the right word. "That's muscle memory from somewhere darker." Maya sipped her coffee, saying nothing. Kim shrugged. "It's cool. We all have our ghosts. Just saying, if you ever want to talk, I'm here." "I appreciate that." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sky shift from purple to orange. Then Kim's radio crackled to life. "All pilots to briefing room. Mandatory session in 15. Kim groaned. Probably another PowerPoint about safety protocols. Maya set down her coffee and headed toward the building, her movements unhurried but purposeful. Inside, she could already hear the murmur of voices, the easy banter of pilots who thought they knew everything. The briefing room smelled like burnt coffee and ego. 30 pilots crowded into metal folding chairs, some still half asleep, others already trading stories about their latest training runs. Maya took a seat in the back, blending into the shadows. She opened a small notebook and began reviewing weather patterns, wind speeds, and terrain maps. While others joked and laughed, she worked. Captain Walsh noticed her from across the room. He leaned over to Lieutenant Cruz and whispered something that made both of them snicker. They glanced in her direction, not even trying to hide it. The door opened, and Colonel Marcus Hendricks strode in, tall, gray-haired, with the kind of command presence that could silence a room without a word. Everyone straightened immediately. "At ease," Hendricks said, moving to the front. "We've got a situation developing." The room went quiet. Hendricks pulled up a map on the large screen. Rugged mountain terrain, deep valleys, hostile markers scattered across the grid. Special Forces Team, call sign Raven 6, is currently engaged in a reconnaissance operation approximately 200 miles northeast of here. High altitude, terrain, extreme weather conditions. They've encountered unexpected resistance and may need emergency extraction within the next 48 hours. A few pilots leaned forward, suddenly more interested. "If the call comes," Hendricks continued, "we'll need our best pilots ready to respond. Combat ready. No hesitation. No second guessing." Walsh raised his hand. "Sir, are we talking about flying into active combat?" "Potentially, yes." A ripple of excitement moved through the room. This was what they'd been training for. This was real. Hendricks scanned the room. "I'll be selecting a primary and backup flight crew this afternoon. If your name is called, you'd better be ready." He dismissed them, and the pilots filed out, their voices louder now, animated with the possibility of real action. Maya stayed seated, staring at the map on the screen. She recognized that terrain, those valleys, that elevation. She'd flown there before, 3 years ago, under a different name, in the darkest hours of night when most pilots refused to fly. Her hand moved unconsciously to the small scar on her jaw, a thin line left by shrapnel from a mission that officially never happened. "Captain Reeves." She looked up. Hendricks was standing at the front, arms crossed, studying her. "Sir, you've been quiet." "Just reviewing the terrain, sir." He nodded slowly. "You ever fly in mountains like that?" Maya chose her words carefully. "I've flown in challenging conditions before." "That's not what I asked." She met his eyes. For a moment, something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. Or suspicion. "Yes, sir," she said finally. "I've flown terrain like that." Hendricks held her gaze a moment longer, then nodded. "Good, because if this goes sideways, I'm going to need every capable pilot we have." He turned and walked out, leaving Maya alone in the empty briefing room. She looked back at the map, at the valleys where men were about to need help, at the mountains where she had once earned a name she no longer used. Phantom. The call sign whispered through her memory like smoke. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the flight line as the pilots gathered for their final training exercises before standby status began. The heat shimmered off the tarmac in waves, turning the distant mountains into liquid mirages. Captain Walsh stood near his Black Hawk, surrounded by a small crowd of younger pilots hanging on his every word. "Listen," he was saying, his voice carrying across the flight line. "When you're taking fire, you don't have time to think. You react. Instinct over intellect. That's what separates real combat pilots from." He paused, his eyes finding Maya across the tarmac. "From instructors." The group laughed, glancing in her direction. Maya ignored them. She was running through her pre-flight checks again, methodical and thorough. Fuel levels, hydraulic pressure, rotor integrity, every item on the list. No shortcuts. Lieutenant Cruz approached Walsh, grinning. "You think textbook over there has ever even heard gunfire? Probably thinks combat is when someone forgets to file their flight plan," Walsh said. More laughter. Maya heard every word. Her hands didn't shake. Her expression didn't change. She just kept working. Lieutenant Kim appeared beside her, tension in her shoulders. "You don't have to take that shit, you know." "Yes, I do," Maya said quietly. "Why?" "Because responding only makes it worse. Let them talk. Words don't change anything." "What does?" Maya looked up, her eyes distant. "Reality." Before Kim could respond, Walsh's voice rang out louder, clearly meant for Maya to hear. "You know what I heard? I heard Captain Reeves got her instructor position because they needed to hit diversity quotas. Not because she's actually qualified for anything real." The laughter died down slightly. A few of the younger pilots looked uncomfortable, sensing Walsh had crossed a line. But Walsh kept going. "I mean, think about it. She's never deployed, never been in combat, never taken fire. She's literally teaching us how to survive situations she's never experienced herself." Maya's hands paused on the checklist. For just a moment, Kim stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Walsh, shut the hell up." He turned, feigning surprise. "Oh, come on, Kim. You're not going to defend her, are you? Even you have to admit." "I don't have to admit anything except that you're an asshole." Walsh smirked. "I'm just asking questions. If Captain Reeves has so much experience, why doesn't she ever talk about it? Why can't she name a single combat mission she's flown?" The flight line had gone quiet now. Other pilots had stopped what they were doing, watching the confrontation unfold. Maya slowly set down her clipboard. She turned to face Walsh, her expression calm but her eyes carrying something that made a few of the smarter pilots take a step back. "Captain Walsh," she said, her voice level and clear. "Do you have a question for me directly?" He grinned, sensing he had an audience. "Yeah, actually, I do. Where did you fly before this assignment?" "Various locations." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting." Walsh laughed, looking around at the others. "See? She can't even answer a simple question. Because there is no answer. She's never been anywhere that mattered." Maya took a slow breath. "Are you finished?" "Just one more thing." Walsh stepped closer, his smile fading into something uglier. "If the call comes for that extraction, you better pray they don't pick you for the crew. Because when shit gets real, your textbook training isn't going to cut it. And I'm not risking my ass flying with someone who freezes under fire." The silence stretched thin and dangerous. Maya held his gaze for 3 long seconds. Then she picked up her clipboard and walked away without another word. Walsh watched her go, triumph written across his face. "That's what I thought." But Lieutenant Kim didn't follow Maya. Instead, she turned to Walsh with disgust in her voice. "You don't know anything about her." "I know enough." "No," Kim said quietly. "You really don't." Inside the operations building, Maya locked herself in the small pilot's locker room. She leaned against the cold metal lockers, her breath steady, her hands finally trembling now that no one could see. She had spent 3 years building this quiet life. 3 years, hiding from a name that carried too much weight. 3 years, pretending to be ordinary. And it had almost worked. She opened her locker slowly. Inside, beneath her flight manuals and extra uniforms, was a small wooden box. She hadn't opened it in months. Hadn't needed to. But now her hands moved on their own. The box opened with a soft creak. Inside, wrapped in faded black cloth, was a single item. A flight patch. Black background. Silver helicopter silhouette. And beneath it, in bold white letters, Phantom 7. Below that, in smaller script, 160th SOAR. Night. Stalkers. She traced her fingers over the stitching, feeling the weight of every mission, every life, every impossible choice she'd made in the dark. 47 souls. That's what the tattoo said. 47 people she'd pulled from hellfire when no one else would fly. 47 reasons she'd become a legend in a world that officially declared her dead. The door opened behind her. Maya quickly closed the box and shoved it back into the locker, but not fast enough. Sergeant Dawson stood in the doorway, his eyes moving from the locker to her face. "Sorry, ma'am. Didn't mean to." He stopped, his expression shifting. That was a Night Stalker patch. Maya said nothing. Dawson stepped inside and closed the door behind him. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "You were 160th. A long time ago." Jesus. Dawson stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "Why are you here? Why are you teaching basic flight training when you should be?" "Because I'm not that person anymore." "Bullshit," Dawson said, echoing Kim's earlier sentiment. "You don't just stop being a Night Stalker. That's not something that washes off." Maya closed her locker, the metallic clang echoing in the small room. "Sometimes it has to." Dawson studied her carefully. "What happened out there?" "Nothing that matters now." "Captain, Sergeant, I appreciate your discretion, but that part of my life is over. I'm just an instructor now. That's all anyone needs to know." Dawson opened his mouth to argue, then slowly nodded. "Understood, ma'am." But as he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "For what it's worth, Walsh is an idiot. Anyone with eyes can see you're the best pilot on this base." "Thank you, Sergeant." He left, and Maya was alone again. She looked at her reflection in the small mirror mounted on the locker. The woman staring back looked tired, haunted, like someone carrying ghosts no one else could see. Outside, the rotors began spinning up for the afternoon training runs. The sound vibrated through the walls, familiar and terrible, calling to something deep inside her she'd tried so hard to bury. But you can't bury who you are. You can only hide it. And hiding only works until the moment you're needed. The briefing room was packed the following morning. Every pilot on the base had been called in, their faces reflecting a mix of anticipation and nervous energy. The situation with Raven 6 had escalated overnight. Colonel Hendricks stood at the front, his expression grim. "Raven 6 is pinned down," he began without preamble. "They've encountered a larger hostile force than intelligence predicted. Current weather conditions in the mountains are deteriorating rapidly. High winds, low visibility, temperatures dropping below freezing at altitude." A map appeared on the screen showing the Special Forces team's position. A narrow valley surrounded by peaks, enemy positions marked in red like bloodstains across the terrain. "They need extraction in the next 12 hours or they won't make it." The room tensed. "The problem," Hendricks continued, "is that the weather window is closing. Winds are gusting to 60 knots in the passes. Cloud ceiling is dropping below safe flight minimums. Most of the extraction routes are compromised." Captain Walsh raised his hand. "Sir, what are the terrain obstacles?" "Peaks, ranging from 8 to 12,000 feet. Narrow approach vectors. Limited landing zones. Zero margin for error. Hendricks paused, letting that sink in. This is a Night Stalker level mission, gentlemen. Except we don't have Night Stalkers. We have you. A nervous murmur rippled through the crowd. I need volunteers for a 2-ship extraction team. Primary and backup. You'll launch at 0400 hours tomorrow if the weather holds. Several hands went up immediately. Walsh's was the first. Captain Walsh. You'll lead the primary aircraft, Hendricks said. Lieutenant Cruz. You're his co-pilot. Lieutenant Morrison. You'll command the backup bird. Walsh grinned, nodding to Cruz with barely contained excitement. Hendricks scanned the room. I need one more pilot for the backup crew. Someone with mountain flying experience and exceptional navigation skills. The colonel's eyes found Maya in the back of the room. Captain Reeves, you're my co-pilot on backup. The room went silent. Walsh's grin faltered. Sir, with all due respect, is there a problem, Captain? Walsh hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Captain Reeves has excellent instructional skills, but this is a combat extraction. I'm not sure she has the experience for this kind of mission. Several pilots nodded in agreement. Hendricks's expression hardened. Captain Reeves has more flight hours in challenging conditions than most of you combined. She's going. But sir, dismissed. The finality in Hendricks's voice left no room for argument. As the pilots filed out, Maya felt their eyes on her. Some curious, some skeptical. Many openly hostile. Walsh stopped beside her seat as he passed. Don't fuck this up, textbook. Real lives are depending on us. She didn't respond. That afternoon, Maya stood in the flight planning room alone, studying the maps with an intensity that went beyond normal preparation. She traced potential routes with her finger, calculating approach angles, wind vectors, and emergency egress options. Her mind worked through scenarios with machine-like precision, seeing patterns others would miss. The door opened. Lieutenant Kim entered, carrying 2 laptops. Thought you might want some help, Kim said, setting up beside her. I'm good. Yeah. Well, humor me. They worked in silence for several minutes. Kim pulling up satellite imagery, while Maya cross-referenced terrain elevation data. Finally, Kim spoke. You know this area, don't you? Maya's hand paused. What makes you say that? Because you haven't looked at the map key once. You're navigating from memory. Maya set down her pencil slowly. I've studied mountain flying extensively. Bullshit. Kim turned to face her fully. I've been watching you. The way you calculated those wind patterns? That's not textbook knowledge. That's experience. Lieutenant, just tell me one thing. Kim interrupted. Can you do this? Can you actually fly this mission? Maya met her eyes. Yes. Even with Walsh constantly questioning you? Even with everyone expecting you to fail? Especially then. Kim studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're different than you pretend to be, aren't you? We're all different than we pretend to be. Yeah, but most of us aren't pretending to be less than what we are. Before Maya could respond, the door burst open. Sergeant Dawson rushed in, his face flushed with urgency. Captain Reeves, you need to see this. He pulled up a weather feed on the main screen. A massive storm system was developing, far worse than the original forecasts. It's accelerating, Dawson said. If this hits before we launch, the mission is scrubbed. Raven 6 won't make it. Maya studied the data, her mind racing through calculations. We'd need to launch 6 hours earlier than planned. In the dark? Kim asked. In the dark, Maya confirmed. Dawson looked at her strangely. Ma'am, night flying in those mountains is… I know what it is. No offense, but night mountain flying in combat conditions requires specialized training. Most pilots can't. Maya turned to him, and something in her eyes made him stop mid-sentence. Sergeant, pull up the weather data from 3 years ago. April 17th. Same region. Dawson frowned, but complied. After a moment, the historical data appeared on screen. Similar storm pattern, Maya said quietly. Similar wind speeds. Similar cloud ceiling. She paused. Someone flew in conditions worse than this. Successfully. Kim leaned forward, reading the data. Who? Maya didn't answer directly. Instead, she pointed to a notation in the historical file. Classified extraction mission. 160th SOAR. 7 personnel recovered. 0 casualties. The Night Stalkers. Dawson whispered. They flew when no one else could. Maya said. They flew in the dark. In the worst conditions. Because lives depended on it. Walsh's voice came from the doorway, dripping with sarcasm. That's great. Real inspiring. But we're not the Night Stalkers, are we? He'd been standing there, listening. Lieutenant Cruz and several other pilots crowded behind him. We're just regular pilots. Walsh continued. Flying regular helicopters. Without their training. Without their experience. He looked directly at Maya. Without their courage. Maya turned slowly to face him. Courage isn't something you have or don't have, Captain. It's something you choose. In the moment when it matters most. Easy to say from a classroom. You think I've never been tested? Walsh stepped closer, his voice dropping to something almost dangerous. I think you've spent 3 years hiding behind manuals and checklists. I think you're terrified of real flying. And I think when we're in those mountains tomorrow, you're going to freeze. The room held its breath. Maya's voice stayed calm, but there was steel beneath it now. I've flown through worse than you can imagine, Captain. In conditions that would ground most pilots before they even started engines. I've made decisions that meant life or death, with no time to second guess. She paused. And I'm still here. Prove it. Tomorrow. When it matters. Walsh laughed, but it sounded hollow. We'll see. He turned and walked out, his followers trailing behind him. The room exhaled slowly. Kim looked at Maya with something new in her eyes. You really have done this before, haven't you? Maya returned to the maps without answering. But Dawson stayed near the computer, staring at that historical data, at the classified mission notation, at the timeline that matched perfectly with when Captain Maya Reeves supposedly joined the instructor cadre at Fort Carson. His eyes widened slightly as a possibility formed in his mind. An impossible possibility. Ma'am, he said quietly. Can I ask you something? You can ask. That mission 3 years ago. April 17th. The one that saved 7 people in impossible conditions. He hesitated. Did you know the pilot who flew that? Maya's hands stopped moving across the map. Because, Dawson continued carefully, I remember hearing stories. About a Night Stalker pilot. Call sign Phantom. They said she flew missions that officially never happened. They said she could navigate by instinct in 0 visibility. They said she, Sergeant, Maya interrupted softly. That pilot doesn't exist anymore. But she did exist. Maya turned to look at him, and for just a moment, the mask slipped. The calm, controlled instructor vanished, and something else looked out through her eyes. Something forged in fire and darkness. Once, she said quietly. Long time ago. Dawson's face showed he understood. Kim showed she was beginning to. Maya gathered her maps and notes. We launch in 14 hours. I suggest you all get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be difficult. She walked toward the door, then paused without turning around. And Sergeant? That conversation stays in this room. Yes, ma'am. After she left, Dawson and Kim stood in silence. Finally, Kim whispered, Holy shit. She's Phantom. She's the Phantom. Dawson nodded slowly. Walsh has no idea who he's been mocking. Should we tell people? No, Dawson said firmly. She asked us to keep it quiet. That means she has her reasons. He looked at the door where she'd disappeared. But tomorrow, when those mountains try to kill them, everyone's going to find out who she really is. Kim nodded, a small smile forming. Walsh is in for the shock of his life. Outside, the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. The same mountains, where, in just a few hours, a woman with a ghost's name would prove that some legends never really die. They just wait for the right moment to fly again. The emergency launch in impossible conditions, Walsh's helicopter failing, Maya taking command. Her skills revealed as she navigates the deadly mountains. recognition beginning to spread among the pilots. The first hints of her true identity becoming undeniable. The alarm shattered the pre-dawn silence at 0230 hours. Maya was already awake. She'd been sitting on the edge of her bunk for the past hour, staring at the wooden box in her hands. The one containing the Phantom 7 patch, the one she'd sworn she'd never wear again. Her fingers traced the silver helicopter silhouette one more time before she closed the box and locked it back in her footlocker. Some things needed to stay buried. The lights flickered on in the hallway outside. Boots pounded against linoleum. Voices shouted urgently through the building. All flight crews to side. Operations. Immediate launch authorization. Maya was already dressed. She grabbed her flight bag and moved into the corridor, joining the stream of pilots rushing toward the briefing room. The operations center was chaos. Screens flickered with weather data, communication feeds, and tactical overlays. Colonel Hendricks stood at the center of it all, his face drawn tight with stress. Raven 6 is in immediate danger, he announced as soon as the pilots assembled. They've been engaged by a larger hostile force. Multiple casualties. They need extraction now, or they won't survive until daylight. The weather feed on the main screen told the story. The storm system had accelerated, winds now gusting to 70 knots through the mountain passes. Cloud ceiling at 800 feet. Visibility, near zero. This is worse than predicted, Lieutenant Morrison said, his voice shaking slightly. It's also not optional, Hendricks replied. Those men are dying. We launch in 30 minutes. Walsh stepped forward, his earlier confidence visibly shaken. Sir, with all respect, these conditions are beyond our capability. We're not equipped for— I know what we're not equipped for, Captain. Hendricks cut him off. I also know 7 American soldiers are bleeding out in those mountains right now. So, we do it anyway. The room fell silent. Maya studied the weather patterns with absolute focus. Her mind was already flying the route, calculating approach vectors, identifying the wind shear layers, mapping the terrain features she'd need to navigate by instrument alone. She'd done this before, in worse conditions, when everyone else said it was impossible. Captain Reeves. She looked up. Hendricks was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Your assessment? Every eye turned to her. Walsh's face showed naked skepticism. Lieutenant Cruz looked openly dismissive. Even Morrison seemed doubtful. Maya stepped forward to the map, her voice calm and measured. The primary approach vector is compromised, she said, pointing to the main valley. Wind shear through this pass will create vortex conditions. Any aircraft attempting this route will lose lift stability. So we can't fly it. Walsh said quickly. I didn't say that. Maya traced an alternative route with her finger. There's a secondary approach through this ravine. Narrower, more dangerous, but it creates a wind shadow that will give us stable air. That ravine is barely wide enough for one helicopter. Morrison protested. It's wide enough if you know how to fly it. Walsh laughed harshly. You're suggesting we thread a Black Hawk through a mountain ravine in the dark with zero visibility. That's suicide. Maya turned to face him. It's survival. For them and for us. You can't possibly. I can. The certainty in her voice stopped him cold. I've flown that route before. The room went completely still. Hendricks leaned forward. When? Maya hesitated for just a heartbeat. 3 years ago. Similar conditions. Successful extraction. What unit were you with? Walsh demanded. That's classified. Bullshit. Enough. Hendricks's voice cracked like a whip. Captain Reeves. You're now primary pilot. Walsh, you're her co-pilot. Walsh's face went red. Sir. I should be flying left seat. You should be following orders, Captain. Captain Reeves has clearly flown this profile before. She leads. Hendricks turned to Morrison. You'll fly back up with Lieutenant Cruz. Stay on Captain Reeves's wing and do exactly what she does. Understood? Yes, sir. Morrison said quietly. Walsh looked like he wanted to argue further, but something in the colonel's expression stopped him. Wheels up in 20 minutes, Hendricks said. And God help us all. The flight line was alive with activity. Ground crews swarmed over the two Black Hawks, performing final checks under portable lights that cast harsh shadows across the tarmac. The wind had already picked up, carrying the smell of approaching rain and the taste of ozone. Maya performed her pre-flight inspection with methodical precision. Every panel, every connection, every system. She'd done this so many times it was more ritual than necessity. But rituals mattered. They kept you grounded when everything else tried to shake you apart. Walsh appeared beside her, his face tight with barely controlled anger. "I don't know what game you're playing," he said quietly. "But when we get up there and you freeze, people are going to die." Maya didn't look up from her checklist. "I won't freeze." "You can't know that." "Yes," she said simply. "I can." She moved past him toward the cockpit, but he grabbed her arm. His grip was firm, almost threatening. "Listen to me. I've been flying combat missions for 6 years. I've taken fire. I've seen people die. I know what it's like up there when everything goes to hell." His voice dropped lower. "You don't. Whatever training you had, whatever classified bullshit you think qualifies you, it's not real until you're actually in it. And I'm not letting you kill us because of your ego." Maya looked down at his hand on her arm, then slowly raised her eyes to meet his. "Captain Walsh," she said, her voice cold and level, "remove your hand. Now." Something in her tone made him step back. "No. When we're in the air," Maya continued, "you will follow my instructions exactly. You will not question. You will not hesitate. You will trust that I know what I'm doing." She paused. "Because if you don't, we will die. And so will Raven 6. She turned and climbed into the pilot's seat, leaving Walsh standing on the tarmac, uncertainty finally creeping into his expression. Inside the cockpit, Maya ran through the startup sequence with practiced efficiency. Her hands moved across the controls like a pianist touching familiar keys. Fuel pumps online. Hydraulics pressurized. Flight systems initialized. Walsh climbed into the right seat, strapping in with angry, jerky movements. "Pre-flight checklist," Maya said calmly. They ran through it in tense silence, each item confirmed with clipped acknowledgments. "Tower. This is dust-off 2-1. Ready for departure," Maya transmitted. "Dust-off 2-1, Tower. You are cleared for immediate takeoff. Godspeed." Maya's hands settled on the controls. The collective in her left hand, the cyclic in her right. Pedals beneath her feet. The helicopter responded to her touch like an extension of her own body. "Pulling power," she announced. The turbines wound up with a rising whine. The rotor blades began to turn. Slowly at first, then faster. The familiar whump-whump-whump building into a steady thunder. Behind them, Morrison's helicopter spooled up in tandem, its lights flickering in the darkness. Maya pulled collective smoothly, and the Black Hawk lifted into the night sky. The storm was waiting. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more inspiring military stories like this one. They climbed into darkness so complete it felt like flying through ink. The storm had already swallowed the stars, leaving only the faint glow of the instrument panel to mark reality from void. Maya's eyes scanned the gauges with mechanical precision. Airspeed, altitude, heading, artificial horizon. Each instrument told her a story about where they were and where the sky wanted to take them. The first gust of wind hit them at 3,000 feet. The Black Hawk lurched violently to the left. Walsh grabbed the overhead handle, his knuckles white in the green glow of the cockpit lights. "Jesus." "Steady," Maya said calmly. She adjusted the cyclic with tiny, precise movements, feeling the aircraft respond beneath her hands. "It's just wind shear. We're going to get a lot more of it." Behind them, Morrison's voice crackled over the radio. "Dust off. 2-1. We're experiencing heavy turbulence. Copy that. 2-2. Stay on my altitude and follow my flight path exactly. The turbulence will smooth out at 4,000 feet. "How do you know that?" Morrison asked. "Because the wind is funneling between the peaks. Once we're above the ridgeline, we'll be in clear air." She paused. Trust me. Another violent gust hit them, this time from the right. The helicopter shook like it was being rattled by an angry god. Walsh stared at the instruments, his breathing accelerating. We should turn back. This is insane. We're committed. We'll die out here. We'll die if we panic. Maya interrupted, her voice still maddeningly calm. Control your breathing, Captain. In through the nose, out through the mouth. You're no good to me if you lose focus. Walsh shot her an angry look, but he followed her instruction. After a moment, his breathing steadied. The altimeter climbed through 3,800 feet, 3,900, 4,000. Suddenly, like passing through a curtain, the turbulence vanished. The helicopter smoothed out, flying stable and level through the darkness. Behind them, Morrison's aircraft emerged from the rough air. Its lights steady now. Holy shit, Morrison whispered over the radio. That was. You were right. Stay with me, Maya said. We're entering the mountains now. Things are going to get tighter. She banked left, following a heading that existed only in her memory. The terrain radar showed walls of stone rising on both sides, invisible in the darkness but deadly real. Walsh stared at the radar display, then at Maya. How are you navigating? GPS is degraded from the storm. We can't see anything. I'm using terrain features and wind patterns. That's impossible without visual reference. No, Maya said quietly. It's just difficult. She adjusted their heading by 3 degrees, threading the helicopter between two peaks that Walsh couldn't even see. The radar showed them passing with less than 200 feet of clearance on each side. Walsh's voice shook. How did you know that gap was there? Because I've flown it before. When? Maya didn't answer. Her focus was absolute. Her movements precise. She was flying the helicopter, but she was also flying through memory. Every ridge, every valley, every wind pattern, she'd mapped them all years ago when flying under a different name, Phantom 7. The radio crackled. Dust off 2-1. This is Raven 6. Do you copy? Maya keyed the mic immediately. Raven 6, this is Dust off 2-1. We read you. What's your status? The voice that came back was young, strained, fighting to stay calm through obvious pain. We've got 4 urgent casualties. Heavy enemy contact. We're running out of ammo and time. Please tell me you're close. We're 20 minutes out. Hold on. Raven 6. We're coming for you. 20 minutes. 20 minutes. The voice cracked slightly. The last crew said it was impossible to fly in these conditions. They turned back. Maya's jaw tightened. We're not turning back. Who? Who is this? For a moment, Maya didn't answer. Then, quietly, someone who doesn't leave people behind. There was a long pause on the other end. When the voice returned, it carried something new. Hope, fragile but real. Copy that, dust off, we'll hold. Walsh was staring at her now with an expression she couldn't read. Not quite respect, not quite fear. Something in between. You really have done this before, he said. And it wasn't a question anymore. Focus on your instruments, Maya replied. I need you watching for wind shear indicators. They flew deeper into the mountains. The darkness pressing against the canopy like a physical weight. The radar showed terrain rising on all sides now, forming a maze of stone that would kill them instantly if Maya made even the smallest mistake. But she didn't make mistakes. Not here, not in these mountains. She'd earned her legend in places like this. Behind them, Lieutenant Kim's voice came over the radio from the operations center. Dust off 2-1, be advised. We're showing extreme wind conditions in your area. Gusts exceeding 70 knots. Copy that, Maya said. We're compensating. How? Kim asked. Genuine curiosity in her voice. Those winds should be making stable flight impossible. They would be, if we were fighting them. But we're not. We're using them. Walsh frowned. What does that mean? Maya adjusted their heading again, this time angling directly into a canyon that looked suicidally narrow on the radar. Wind flows like water, she explained. her voice taking on the tone of an instructor even as she threaded them through a gap barely wider than their rotor diameter. It follows the path of least resistance through the valleys. If you fight it, you lose. If you work with it, it carries you exactly where you need to go. That's not in any manual I've ever read. No. Maya agreed. It's not. Morrison's voice came through, tight with stress. Dust off 2 to 1. I'm having trouble holding your flight path. You're making maneuvers I can't anticipate. Don't try to anticipate, Maya instructed. Just mirror. When I bank, you bank. When I descend, you descend. Don't think. Just follow. Copy that. They emerged from the narrow canyon into a slightly wider valley. The wind howled around them, but Maya rode it like a surfer on a wave, making constant tiny adjustments that kept them stable. Walsh was no longer looking skeptical. He was looking at Maya like he was seeing her for the first time. No one flies like this, he said quietly. I've flown with the best pilots in the Army. This is something else. Maya didn't respond. Her focus was absolute, her connection with the aircraft total. Another voice broke into the frequency. Deeper. Older. Carrying the weight of command. Dust off 2 to 1, this is Nighthawk 6. I'm monitoring your flight path from the TOC. Walsh straightened. That's General Morrison, commander of all aviation operations in this theater. I see your flight profile. The general continued. Who is your pilot in command? Walsh hesitated, then keyed the mic. Sir, this is Captain Walsh. Captain Reeves is flying left seat. Silence. Then, Captain Reeves, your route selection and flying technique are unconventional. What training background do you have? Maya's hands never left the controls. Various schools, sir. That's not an answer, Captain. It's the only one I can give over an unsecured channel, sir. Another pause, longer this time. When the general spoke again, his tone had changed. Sharper, more focused. Captain, I'm looking at your flight profile. The way you're navigating these canyons. The way you're reading the wind patterns. He trailed off. I've only seen one pilot fly like this. But that pilot is dead. The cockpit seemed to shrink. Walsh turned to stare at Maya, his eyes wide. Sir, Maya said quietly. I need to focus on the mission. What was your call sign, Captain? Sir. Your call sign, Captain. That's an order. Maya's hands tightened on the controls. Every fiber of her being screamed to stay silent, to keep the past buried where it belonged. But the general wasn't going to let this go. And deep down, maybe she was tired of hiding. Phantom 7, sir, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. My call sign was Phantom 7. The radio went completely silent. In the operations center, back at Fort Carson, every person in the room turned to stare at the communications console. Lieutenant Kim's face went pale. Sergeant Dawson's mouth fell open. Colonel Hendricks, standing at the back of the room, closed his eyes and nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd suspected all along. In the cockpit, Walsh was shaking his head in disbelief. Phantom 7. The Night Stalker pilot. The one who flew 47 rescue missions. The one who... He swallowed hard. The one who died saving an entire Special Forces team 3 years ago. I didn't die, Maya said quietly. I just stopped existing. Why? Because that mission broke something in me. And the Army needed Phantom 7 to be a legend. Not a broken pilot who couldn't sleep without seeing the faces of everyone she couldn't save. Walsh stared at her, stunned into silence. General Morrison's voice returned, thick with emotion. Captain Reeves. Maya. You saved my son on that mission. Captain David Morrison. He was on the team you extracted. Maya's breath caught. Sir, He talks about you. About the pilot who flew through hell to bring them home. About the woman who wouldn't give up even when command ordered her to abort. The general's voice cracked slightly. We thought you were dead. We buried an empty casket, with full honors. I know, sir. I was there. Watching from the back. Why did you disappear? Because I couldn't be that person anymore. 47 missions. Sir. 47 times I risked everything. And every time, I thought I'd made the right choice. Until the 48th mission, when I realized I'd been making the same selfish choice over and over. She paused, her voice thick with old pain. I wasn't saving people. I was proving I could. And that's not courage. That's ego. And ego gets people killed. You're wrong, the general said firmly. What you did was the purest form of courage I've ever seen. Flying when no one else would. Risking your life because others needed you. That's not ego. That's heroism. Then why do I still hear them screaming? The question hung in the air, raw and painful. Walsh reached over slowly and touched her shoulder. Not grabbing. Just connecting. Because you're human, he said quietly. And that's what makes you the best pilot I've ever flown with. Maya blinked hard, forcing the emotion down. We have a mission to complete. Copy that, Walsh said. And this time, there was nothing but respect in his voice. Morrison's helicopter had been silent through the entire exchange. Now his voice came through, shaking with awe. Ma'am, it's an honor to fly with you. Stay on my wing, Lieutenant, Maya replied. We're not done yet. Ahead, through the darkness and storm, the valley where Raven 6 waited was drawing closer. And Phantom 7, the ghost who had haunted these mountains for 3 years, was flying again. The valley appeared through the storm like a wound in the earth, narrow, steep-sided, surrounded by enemy positions marked in red on the tactical display. Maya studied the approach with cold precision, her mind calculating angles, wind speeds, exposure times. Raven 6, dust off 2 to 1, we're 2 minutes out. Pop smoke. Copy, dust off. Popping smoke. A moment later, through the darkness and rain, a faint red glow appeared in the valley below. Chemical smoke. Thick and visible even in these conditions. I have visual on your position, Maya said. Stand by for approach. She nosed the Black Hawk down, descending into the valley at an angle that made Walsh grip his armrests. We're coming in too steep, he warned. We need the altitude for momentum. If we take fire on approach, I want energy to maneuver. But, trust me. The helicopter dropped like a stone, the valley walls rising on both sides. Muzzle flashes sparked from the ridgelines above. Tracer rounds arced through the darkness, bright streaks searching for them. Taking fire, Walsh called out, his voice tight. I see it. Maya's hands moved with mechanical precision, jinking the helicopter left, then right, using the terrain to mask their approach. The rounds passed behind them, tracking where they'd been, not where they were going. Because she wasn't flying predictably. She was flying the way Phantom 7 always flew, like someone who'd seen death so many times she knew exactly how to dance around it. The landing zone rushed up, a small clearing barely larger than the helicopter's footprint, surrounded by wounded soldiers and the flash of gunfire. Too small, Walsh said. We can't fit. Yes, we can. Maya flared the helicopter at the last second. Bleeding off speed with perfect precision, the skids touched down exactly in the center of the clearing, with less than 6 feet of clearance on each side. Jesus Christ, Walsh whispered. Raven 6, we're on the ground. Load your casualties now. The back of the helicopter exploded with activity. Wounded soldiers were carried aboard by their teammates, their faces pale, their uniforms dark with blood. A young medic worked frantically on a soldier who looked barely alive. Maya watched the tactical display. Enemy positions were moving closer. They had maybe 60 seconds before this landing zone became a kill zone. Dust off 2 to 1. This is Raven 6 actual. A new voice. Older. Battle-hardened. 4 casualties loaded. We need 1 more pass for the rest of the team. Maya's jaw tightened. Negative Raven 6. We're at max capacity. Morrison's bird will extract the rest. Ma'am. With respect. His approach vector is compromised. Heavy fire on the beat. West Ridge. He won't make it. Maya glanced at the tactical display. He was right. The enemy had moved to block Morrison's approach. Morrison, abort your approach. Circle east and come in behind my departure vector. Copy that. Wait, I'm taking fire. Multiple hits. I'm losing hydraulics. Maya's blood went cold. On the tactical display, Morrison's helicopter was trailing smoke, wobbling dangerously. Morrison. Status. Hydraulics failing. Flight controls are degrading. I don't think I can make the approach. Walsh turned to Maya, his face reflecting the impossible situation. If he can't pick them up, the rest of Raven 6 is dead. Maya stared at the tactical display, at Morrison's failing helicopter, at the soldiers still on the ground, at the enemy positions closing in. 47 missions, 47 times she'd made this choice. She'd promised herself there wouldn't be a 48th, but some promises weren't meant to be kept. Raven 6, load the remaining personnel onto my aircraft. Ma'am, you're already overweight. You'll never clear the valley walls. Load them, now. Walsh grabbed her arm. Maya, he's right. If we take more weight, we won't have enough power to climb. We'll crash into the mountainside. She looked at him, and he saw the ghost of Phantom 7 looking back. I've done it before, she said simply. When? The mission that supposedly killed me. Understanding flooded Walsh's face. The one where you extracted 12 people from a helicopter rated for 8. 15 people, Maya corrected, from a helicopter rated for 6. Everyone said it was impossible, that the pilot who did it couldn't have survived. I survived because I stopped caring about whether I lived. I only cared about whether they did. She turned back to the controls. Load them. The remaining soldiers scrambled aboard. The helicopter sagged under their weight. Warning alarms began to sound. Red lights flashed across the instrument panel. We're 3,000 pounds overweight, Walsh said, his voice shaking. The power margins don't exist. I know. Maya pulled collective, demanding maximum power from the turbines. The engines screamed. The helicopter shuddered. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, impossibly, they lifted off the ground. Oh my God, Walsh whispered. Maya focused every ounce of her skill on keeping the overloaded aircraft flying. The cyclic felt like moving through concrete. The collective required both hands to hold. The pedals fought her with every correction. They climbed, agonizingly slow, toward the valley walls. We're not going to make it, Walsh said, watching the terrain radar. The ridgeline is too high. We don't have enough power to. I'm not climbing over it. What? I'm going through it. Ahead, barely visible through the storm, a narrow gap appeared in the ridgeline. A notch carved by centuries of wind and water. Barely wide enough for a helicopter. Certainly not wide. Enough for a helicopter that was 3,000 pounds overweight and could barely maneuver. That's insane, Walsh said. Yes, Maya agreed. It is. She lined up on the gap, her hands steady despite the screaming alarms and the impossible weight. In the operations center, General Morrison watched the radar feed with his fist pressed against his mouth. Colonel Hendricks stood beside him, both men silent with terrible anticipation. She's going to try threading that gap, someone whispered. No one can fly that profile, another voice said. Phantom can, Sergeant Dawson said quietly. The helicopter approached the notch at agonizing speed. Too slow to have any momentum. Too heavy to make any mistakes. Maya's world narrowed to a single point of focus. The gap. Nothing else existed. Not the alarms, not the weight, not the fear. Just the gap. And the 15 people behind her who needed her to make this work. The rotor tips came within inches of the rock walls. The skids cleared by less than a foot. The tail boom passed through with millimeters to spare. And then they were through. Clear air on the other side. Open sky. Salvation. Walsh let out a breath he'd been holding for 30 seconds. I don't believe that just happened. Behind them, one of the soldiers from Raven 6 leaned forward, his face streaked with blood and dirt. Who are you? He asked, his voice filled with awe. Maya adjusted their heading, finally allowing herself a small breath. Someone who used to fly in the dark, she said quietly. The soldier stared at her for a long moment. Then his eyes widened. Wait! The way you fly. The impossible maneuvers. Oh my God. He turned to his teammates. It's her. It's Phantom. Another soldier leaned forward, studying Maya's profile. His voice shook when he spoke. You saved my brother. 3 years ago. Mission in the Hindu Kush. They said the pilot died. She did, Maya said. This is someone else. No. The soldier said firmly. You don't fly like that and be someone else. You're Phantom 7. The legend. The ghost. Walsh turned to look at the soldiers, then back at Maya. Understanding settled over his features like dawn breaking. How many missions? He asked quietly. 47. Maya said. And tonight? She was quiet for a moment. 48. Welcome back, Walsh said simply. Behind them, Morrison's damaged helicopter limped through the gap, his flight controls barely responding. Maya watched him on the tactical display, ready to talk him through every maneuver if needed. But he made it. Following her path. Flying through her wind shadow. Because that's what Phantom 7 did. She didn't just save the people on her helicopter. She saved everyone flying in her wake. The storm began to clear as they flew toward home. The first hints of dawn touched the eastern horizon, painting the clouds in shades of gold and red, and in that light, Maya Reeves' Phantom 7 finally allowed herself to believe what everyone else already knew. She was exactly who she'd always been. The pilot who flew when no one else could. The ghost who haunted the mountains. The legend who refused to let anyone die on her watch. She was Phantom. And she was flying home. The rotors began their descent into silence as Maya guided the overloaded Black Hawk toward Fort Carson's main flight line. Dawn had broken fully now, washing the tarmac in soft orange light that made everything look gentler than it was. But there was nothing gentle about what waited for them on the ground. The entire base had gathered. Hundreds of soldiers, pilots, mechanics, and support staff lined both sides of the landing pad. They stood in formation, silent and still, as if waiting for something sacred. Walsh noticed first. Maya. What is this? She didn't answer. Her focus remained absolute as she brought the helicopter down with the same impossible precision that had carried them through the mountains. The skids touched the tarmac with barely a tremor, despite the 3,000 pounds of excess weight. As the turbines wound down, the silence outside became palpable. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something heavier. Respect, awe, recognition. Maya sat motionless in the pilot's seat, her hands still resting on the controls. She knew what was coming. She'd been dreading this moment for 3 years. You have to face them, Walsh said quietly. I know. They deserve to see you. I know that too. But still, she didn't move. Because once she stepped out of this helicopter, once she accepted what they were offering, there would be no going back. Maya Reeves, the quiet instructor who hid in plain sight, would disappear forever. Only Phantom would remain. Behind them, the crew chief opened the side door. The wounded soldiers from Raven 6 were already being transferred to waiting medics, each one pausing to look back at the cockpit, searching for a glimpse of the pilot who'd saved them. One of them, the young sergeant who'd recognized her voice, stopped beside the door. He was limping, his leg wrapped in bloody bandages. But he stood as straight as he could. Ma'am, he called into the cockpit. Permission to speak. Maya finally unbuckled her harness and turned to face him. Granted. The sergeant's voice carried out across the silent flight line. My brother was on the team you saved 3 years ago. The mission in the Hindu Kush. The one where they said you died. His eyes glistened. He told me about you. About the pilot who flew through a missile corridor to reach them. About how you took fire from 3 directions and still wouldn't leave until everyone was aboard. About how you talked him through his panic when he thought he was going to die. Maya's throat tightened. He said you told him something. The sergeant continued. He said you told him that as long as the rotors were turning, hope was still alive. The young man's voice cracked. Those words got him through 7 more years of service. They got him home to his family. He straightened as much as his wounded leg would allow and raised his hand in a crisp salute. Thank you for bringing me home too, Phantom. Thank you for not being dead. The salute held. Perfect. Unwavering. Maya stood slowly, her legs unsteady after hours of flying. She stepped down from the cockpit, and as her boots touched the tarmac, something shifted in the air. She raised her hand and returned the sergeant's salute. The moment her hand touched her brow, the entire flight line erupted into motion. Every soldier, every pilot, every person who had gathered, they all came to attention simultaneously. The sound of hundreds of boots snapping together echoed like thunder across the base. And then, as one, they saluted. The wave of raised hands stretched across the tarmac like a living thing. Officers and enlisted, pilots and ground crew, people who had doubted her and people who had believed. All of them saluting the ghost who had come back from the dead. Walsh climbed down from the co-pilot seat, his face pale with emotion. He walked around the front of the helicopter and stopped in front of Maya. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "For everything I said. For doubting you. For being such an arrogant ass. You didn't know. I should have known." He cut her off gently. "Not because of your record or your call sign, but because of the way you flew. Because of how you carried yourself. Because of the quiet confidence that only comes from someone who's already faced death and made peace with it." He took a breath. "I was too busy trying to prove I was the best to recognize when the real best was standing right in front of me." He stepped back and snapped to attention, his salute sharp and formal. "Captain Walsh," Maya said softly. "At ease. With respect." "Ma'am, I'll be at ease when you accept the honor you've earned." Her eyes swept across the sea of salutes. Hundreds of them, held in perfect stillness. Lieutenant Kim stood near the operations building, tears streaming down her face, her salute unwavering. Sergeant Dawson stood with the maintenance crew, his weathered face showing an emotion Maya had never seen from him before. Pride. Lieutenant Morrison, his helicopter smoking and damaged behind him, stood with his crew, all of them at rigid attention. And at the back of the formation, standing alone, was Colonel Hendricks. His salute was different from the others. It wasn't just respect. It was acknowledgement. Confirmation. He'd known all along. Maya's vision blurred. She blinked hard, fighting to maintain control. "Phantom 7. A voice called from the crowd. Strong. Clear. Filled with reverence. Then another voice joined. "Phantom 7. Then another. And another. The chant built slowly, rolling across the flight line like a wave. "Phantom 7. Phantom 7. Phantom 7. Not mocking. Not celebrating. Just remembering. Honoring. Welcoming her back from the darkness she'd hidden in. Maya's hand trembled as she held her salute. Every face she saw carried the weight of their own stories, their own missions, their own ghosts. And in that moment, she understood something she'd been too broken to see 3 years ago. She hadn't been saving people because of ego. She'd been saving them because that's what you do when you have the skill, the courage, and the moment demands it. That wasn't selfishness. That was service. A black sedan rolled to a stop at the edge of the flight line. The door opened, and a man in a crisp uniform with stars on his shoulders stepped out. General Morrison. The crowd recognized him immediately. The chanting stopped. Every salute sharpened. The general walked across the tarmac with measured steps, his face carved from stone, his eyes fixed on Maya. He stopped 3 feet in front of her, and they stood there. The legendary Phantom 7 and the general whose son she had saved. "Captain Reeves," he said formally. "Or should I say, Captain Hart." Maya's breath caught. Hart was her real name, the one she'd buried with Phantom. "Maya Hart," the general continued. "Night Stalker pilot. Call sign Phantom 7. 47 successful combat rescue missions. 312 lives saved. 4 aircraft shot out from under you. 7 Purple Hearts. 2 Silver Stars." His voice grew quieter. "One son brought home alive when everyone else said it was impossible." He stepped closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "My boy was 23 years old. Brand new Special Forces soldier. Thought he was invincible, until that mission went wrong. The general's eyes glistened. He was bleeding out in that valley, convinced he was going to die. And then he heard your voice over the radio. Calm, steady, promising him that as long as your rotors were turning, he was coming home. The general's voice broke slightly. You flew through a surface-to-air missile corridor. You took fire from every direction. Your aircraft was hit 16 times, and you never wavered, never hesitated, never stopped flying until every single soldier was aboard. He paused, struggling with emotion. The wreckage they found, we thought no one could have survived. We buried an empty coffin. We gave you full honors. And my son stood at that funeral and told me you were the bravest person he'd ever known. A tear rolled down the general's weathered cheek. I need you to understand something, Captain. What you did wasn't just brave. It was beyond brave. It was a father getting his son back. It was a wife getting her husband. It was children getting their parent. His voice strengthened. You gave us back our families. And we thought you were gone. We thought we'd lost you. Maya's own tears finally broke free, streaming down her face. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry I disappeared. I couldn't be her anymore. I couldn't keep flying toward death and pretending I was doing it for the right reasons. You were, the general said firmly. Every single time. You flew because people needed you, because you had the skill to save them when no one else did. That's not ego, Captain. That's the purest form of courage I've ever witnessed. He stepped back, his posture shifting into rigid formality. And then General Morrison, commander of all aviation operations in the theater, a man who had flown combat missions in 3 wars, a decorated soldier who had seen and done things that would break most people, saluted Captain Maya Hart, Phantom 7, with tears streaming down his face. The salute was held in absolute stillness. Perfect. Eternal. Maya, her own face wet with tears, returned it with trembling precision. When they finally lowered their hands, the general spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. This base, this unit, this entire command, is honored to have Captain Maya Hart back among the living. She is a legend, for a reason. Not because of the missions she flew, but because of the souls she saved. He turned to address the assembled formation. Some pilots fly for glory. Some fly for rank. Some fly because it's their job. He looked back at Maya. Phantom flies because when she doesn't, people die. And she's decided that's not acceptable. The base erupted. Not in cheers. Not in celebration. But in a sound that was uniquely military. The sound of hundreds of boots, stomping in unison. The sound of respect, expressed through synchronized thunder. The stomping built into a rhythm. Steady. Powerful. Like a heartbeat. Maya stood at the center of it all, no longer hiding, no longer running, finally accepting what she'd tried so hard to escape. She was Phantom 7. And Phantom didn't abandon people, not 3 years ago. Not today. Not ever. As the formation gradually dismissed, pilots and soldiers moving to their duties with quiet purpose. Walsh remained standing near the helicopter. He hadn't moved since his salute. Hadn't looked away. Maya noticed him there, isolated in his stillness while the world moved around him. She walked over slowly, her flight suit still stained with sweat and grime. Captain Walsh. He turned to face her, and she saw something in his expression she hadn't expected. Not shame, exactly. Something deeper. Devastation mixed with understanding. I spent 6 years, he said quietly. 6 years thinking I was one of the best. Building my reputation. Making sure everyone knew my name. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. And then you show up. Quiet. Humble. Not making any claims about yourself. And I assumed, God, I assumed you were nothing. You didn't know. I should have. His voice was sharp with self-recrimination. Not because of your record, but because of how you carried yourself. The way you checked every bolt personally. The way you flew with absolute precision even in training. The way you never needed to prove anything to anyone. He looked up, at the sky, where the first rays of true morning were breaking through the clouds. "You know what the difference is between us?" he asked. "I fly to prove I'm good. You fly to keep people alive." And I was so busy trying to be the former that I couldn't recognize the latter when she was right in front of me. Maya was quiet for a moment. "You flew well today. When it mattered, you trusted me. You followed my lead. You kept your head. Because I didn't have a choice. Because you were flying at a level I've never even seen before." He turned to face her fully. 48 missions, Phantom. 48 times you've risked your life for strangers. How do you keep doing it?" "I don't think about it as 48 times," Maya said. "I think about it as 15 people tonight who get to see their families again. That's all. Just 15 people who were going to die, and now they won't." Walsh nodded slowly, understanding settling over him like a weight. "I mocked you," he said. "In front of everyone. Multiple times. I questioned your competence, your experience, your right to even be here." His voice cracked. "And you saved my life anyway. That's the job." "No." He shook his head firmly. "The job is flying the helicopter. What you did was something else entirely. You flew us through conditions that should have killed us. You threaded that overloaded aircraft through a gap no one else would have even attempted. He struggled for words. "You made the impossible look routine." He stepped back and came to attention again, his salute rising with slow, deliberate precision. "Captain Maya Hart, Phantom 7, he said formally. "It has been the greatest honor of my career to fly as your co-pilot. I am sorry for every doubt I expressed. I am sorry for every dismissive word. I am sorry for being too blind to see what everyone else here sees now." His salute held, unwavering. "You are everything a pilot should aspire to be, and I hope, someday, I can earn even a fraction of the respect you've earned through your courage." Maya returned his salute, holding it for a long moment. When they lowered their hands, she stepped closer and spoke quietly. "Captain Walsh, you want to know the truth about courage?" "Yes, ma'am. It's not about being fearless. It's not about never doubting yourself. It's not even about always making the right choice." She paused. "It's about acknowledging your mistakes and growing from them. You did that today. When it mattered most. You set aside your ego and trusted someone else's experience. That takes a different kind of courage." Walsh's eyes glistened. "The pilot who flew with me tonight," Maya continued, "isn't the same pilot who mocked me yesterday. That pilot learned. That pilot grew. That pilot became better." She offered a small smile. "That's all any of us can do." "Thank you," Walsh whispered. "Now, go get some rest. You've earned it." He nodded and turned to walk away, but paused after a few steps. "Phantom?" "Yes?" "The next time you fly into hell." He looked back at her with absolute sincerity. "I hope I'm good enough to be your co-pilot again." "You will be," Maya said simply. As Walsh walked toward the operations building, Lieutenant Kim approached with Sergeant Dawson at her side. Both of them looked exhausted but electric with emotion. "Ma'am," Kim said, then stopped and corrected herself. "Maya, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you hide? Why become an instructor instead of staying with the Night Stalkers? You could have written your own ticket. Command your own unit. Become a legend they actually talked about." Maya looked out across the flight line, where ground crews were already swarming over her damaged helicopter, beginning the repairs. "Because legends aren't people," she said quietly. "They're symbols. Stories. Things that exist in the past tense." She turned back to Kim. "And I needed to be a person again. Someone who could sleep without seeing faces. Someone who could fly without feeling like every mission might be the last. Someone who could just exist." "But you couldn't stay away," Dawson observed. "No," Maya admitted. "When people needed help, I couldn't stand by and do nothing. That's not hiding. That's just breaking." Kim stepped forward and did something unexpected. She wrapped Maya in a tight hug. "You're not broken," she whispered. "You're human, and that makes everything you've done even more incredible." Maya stood stiffly for a moment, unused to this kind of connection. Then, slowly, she returned the embrace. When they separated, Dawson was holding something in his hands. The wooden box from her locker. The one containing the Phantom 7 patch. "I took the liberty," he said carefully, "of retrieving this from your quarters. Thought you might want it." Maya stared at the box, at the symbol of everything she'd tried to leave behind. "I can't wear that anymore," she said. "That's not who I am now." "Then who are you?" Kim asked gently. Maya thought about it. About the quiet instructor who had hidden for 3 years. About the legend who had flown 47 impossible missions. About the woman who had just flown the 48th. "Both," she said finally. "I'm both. Maya Reeves, the instructor who teaches patience and precision, and Phantom 7, who flies when no one else can." She took the box from Dawson. "Maybe I don't have to choose. Maybe I can just be complete." Dawson smiled. "Now that sounds like someone I'd follow into any storm." 3 hours later, after the wounded had been cared for and the helicopters secured, Colonel Hendricks called a base-wide formation in the main hangar. Every pilot, every crew chief, every soldier on Fort Carson gathered in the massive space. The morning sun streamed through the high windows, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Maya stood near the back, trying to blend into the crowd as she always had. But this time, people recognized her, made space for her, nodded with respect as she passed. Walsh appeared beside her, cleaned up and in a fresh uniform. He didn't say anything, just stood at her shoulder like a wingman should. Colonel Hendricks took the raised platform at the front, his voice carrying across the assembly. "This morning," he began, "we accomplished a mission that most experts said was impossible. We extracted 15 soldiers from a hostile valley in conditions that grounded every other unit in theater. We brought them home alive." The hangar was silent, everyone listening. But this isn't a story about success against the odds. This is a story about what real leadership looks like. What real courage looks like. Hendricks paused. "And what real sacrifice looks like." He gestured toward the back where Maya stood. 3 years ago, we lost one of the finest pilots this country has ever produced. Captain Maya Hart, callsign Phantom 7, Night Stalker, died saving a Special Forces team in the Hindu Kush Mountains. Or so we thought. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The truth is more complicated. Captain Hart survived that mission. But something in her broke that day. She'd flown 47 rescue missions, saved over 300 lives. And she couldn't reconcile the cost anymore. Couldn't keep staring into death and pretending it didn't leave marks. Hendricks' voice softened. So she asked to disappear. To be listed as Kia so she could step away from the impossible burden she'd been carrying. And we granted that request because sometimes the bravest thing you can do for a soldier is let them rest. He looked directly at Maya. But heroes don't stay hidden forever. They can't. Because when the moment comes, when lives hang in the balance, they step forward. They always step forward. The colonel descended from the platform and walked through the formation toward Maya. The crowd parted silently, creating a path. He stopped in front of her, holding a small wooden case. "Captain Maya Hart, you have flown 48 combat rescue missions. You have saved over 327 lives. You have been shot down 4 times and survived. You have flown through conditions that would ground entire squadrons. And today, you proved once again that when courage is needed, you answer the call." He opened the case. Inside, against black velvet, rested a medal. The Distinguished Flying Cross. This medal should have been presented 3 years ago for the mission that officially ended your life. Instead, I'm presenting it now for the mission that brought you back to us. Hendricks removed the medal from its case and pinned it to Maya's flight suit with steady hands. The Distinguished Flying Cross is awarded for heroism and extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight. Captain Hart has earned this medal 48 times over. But this one represents something more. It represents the courage to come back, to face your demons, to accept that you are exactly who you've always been. He stepped back and saluted sharply. "Welcome home, Phantom 7. The hangar exploded. Not with cheers or whistles, but with the thunder of boots stomping in unison. The sound rolled through the building like a physical force, building in intensity until the very walls seemed to vibrate. Maya stood at the center of it, tears streaming down her face, no longer trying to hide them. One by one, the pilots she'd trained with stepped forward. Morrison first, his helicopter still smoking on the line from following her through hell. Then the younger pilots she'd instructed, the ones who'd once doubted her. Then the crew chiefs and mechanics who'd watched her inspect every bolt with meticulous care. Each one stopped in front of her and saluted. Each salute held for a moment of perfect stillness, and each one carried the same message. We see you. We know you. We honor you. Walsh was last. He approached slowly, his eyes locked on hers. When he saluted, he spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. Phantom 7. It would be my honor to serve as your wingman, now and always. Maya returned his salute, her voice thick with emotion. The honor is mine, Captain. As the formation slowly dispersed, soldiers returning to their duties, but moving differently now, carrying something new in their bearing, General Morrison approached with a folder in his hands. Captain Hart, he said formally. A word? They walked to a quiet corner of the hangar, away from the crowds. The general opened the folder. Inside were orders, official and stamped. The Army would like to offer you a position, he said. Commanding officer of a new training program for high-risk combat aviation. You would teach the next generation of pilots how to fly in impossible conditions. How to make the choices you've made. How to save lives when everyone else says it can't be done. Maya stared at the orders. You'd have full autonomy, the general continued. Pick your own instructors. Design your own curriculum. No one questions your methods or your judgment. He paused. And you'd be based here, where you've built a life as Maya Reeves. No deployments unless you choose them. No pressure to be phantom unless the situation demands it. Why? Maya asked quietly. Why not just reactivate me and put me back in a cockpit? The general smiled sadly. Because we almost lost you once, by pushing you too hard. By making you carry a burden no single person should carry. He closed the folder. This way, you get to be both. The instructor who teaches patience, and the legend who flies when it matters. On your terms, in your time. Maya looked out across the hangar, where young pilots were gathered around Walsh, listening as he recounted the night's mission with animated gestures and newfound respect. They need to know it's possible, she said softly. They need to know that even in the darkest moments, even when the odds are impossible, there's always a way forward if you're willing to find it. Then teach them, the general said. Be the voice they hear in their darkest hours. Be the example they follow when courage is needed. Maya took the folder. Her hands steady now. I accept. The general nodded, satisfaction clear on his face. Then he did something unexpected. He extended his hand. Thank you, he said simply, for bringing my son home, for bringing all of them home. Maya shook his hand, feeling the weight of 3 years of hiding finally lift from her shoulders. That's what Phantom does, she said. She brings people home. As the sun climbed higher over Fort Carson, Maya walked back to her helicopter. The ground crew had already begun repairs, their hands moving with practiced efficiency over the bullet holes and stress fractures. She ran her hand along the fuselage, feeling the scars from the night's mission, battle damage that told a story of survival against impossible odds. Kim found her there, standing in the shadow of the rotor blades. You okay? Kim asked. Maya smiled, genuine and free for the first time in years. Yeah, she said. I think I finally am. What happens now? Now I teach. I fly. I live. Maya looked up at the morning sky, where clouds were breaking apart to reveal endless blue. I stop hiding from who I am, and accept that maybe, just maybe, being Phantom isn't a curse. It's a gift. The gift of impossible flight? The gift of hope. Maya turned to face her. When people see that someone can fly through the worst conditions imaginable, and still bring everyone home, they start to believe that impossible might just be another word for difficult. Kim nodded slowly. You're going to change everything here, you know that. This whole base, the way we think about flying, about courage, about what's possible. Good, Maya said simply. Because the world needs more people willing to fly into the dark. And maybe I can teach them how. As they walked back toward the operations building, Walsh appeared with a group of younger pilots in tow. Ma'am, he called out. These pilots have some questions about night mountain flying. I told them the best instructor I know might be willing to share some techniques. Maya looked at the eager faces surrounding her. Young, hopeful, ready to learn. All right, she said. Gather in briefing room 2 in 20 minutes. Bring your notebooks. They scattered with enthusiasm, leaving Walsh standing with her. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For being patient with me. For not giving up on me, even when I was an ass. He smiled slightly. For showing me what real courage looks like. You showed that yourself, Maya replied. When you trusted me in those mountains. When you followed my lead, even though everything in you wanted to question it. That was courage, Captain. Maybe, he said. But I learned it from watching you. As he walked away, Sergeant Dawson approached with a familiar wooden box in his hands. Ma'am, I had the prompt. Crew make something for you. He opened the box. Inside was a new flight patch. The same black background and silver helicopter as the original Phantom 7 patch. But beneath the call sign, new words had been stitched in white thread. 48 missions. 342 souls. Still flying. We thought, Dawson said carefully, that maybe you'd want to wear this one. Acknowledges where you've been. Recognizes where you are now. Maya lifted the patch with trembling fingers. It was heavier than it should have been. Weighted with meaning and memory and hope. It's perfect, she whispered. There's one more thing. Dawson pulled out a second item. A small metal pin in the shape of a helicopter with wings spread wide. Everyone on this base who flew with you tonight, or who's been inspired by your story, we're all wearing these now. We call ourselves Ghost Flight. Because we follow Phantom's example, flying when others won't, saving who others can't. Maya's vision blurred again as she looked at the simple pin. You've started something, Dawson said. A legacy that goes beyond just you. You've reminded all of us why we put on the uniform, why we climb into these machines and risk everything. He pinned the Ghost Flight symbol to his own uniform. You've reminded us that courage isn't about never being afraid. It's about flying anyway. Maya stood there, surrounded by the evidence of her impact. The damaged helicopter behind her. The patch in her hands. The pin on Dawson's chest. The young pilots eager to learn from her experience. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't broken anymore. She was simply complete. Maya Reeves, the patient instructor who taught precision and discipline. And Phantom 7, the legend who flew through darkness to bring people home. Both. Always both. Come on, she said to Dawson. We've got a class to teach. And these pilots need to know that impossible is just a challenge we haven't figured out yet. As they walked toward the briefing room, the morning sun caught the silver threads on the new patch in her hands, making them gleam like hope itself. Behind them, the Black Hawk stood as testament to the night's impossible mission. Battle-scarred but unbroken, damaged but still capable. Just like the pilot who flew it, the legend who refused to stay dead, the ghost who haunted the mountains not to frighten, but to save. Phantom 7 was flying again, and she wasn't done yet. 6 months later, Fort Carson's Advanced Combat Aviation program had become the most sought-after training assignment in the Army. Pilots from every branch requested transfers just for the chance to learn from the legend herself. Maya stood in front of a classroom packed with eager students. A tactical map of mountain terrain displayed on the screen behind her. The mission is impossible, she said calmly. Weather is below minimums. Terrain is hostile. Enemy forces are active. Your aircraft is damaged. And 15 people are going to die if you don't figure out a way forward. The students shifted nervously. So, Maya continued, what do you do? A young pilot in the front row raised his hand. Ma'am, we call for backup. Backup is 30 minutes away. People don't have 30 minutes. We wait for conditions to improve? Conditions are getting worse, not better. Silence filled the room as the students grappled with the impossible scenario. Finally, a female pilot in the back spoke up. "Ma'am, we fly anyway. We find a route no one else sees. We use every technique we've learned. And we trust that impossible just means no one's done it yet." Maya smiled. Exactly. Because that's what phantom flight means. It means, when everyone else says no, we find a way to say yes. She advanced the slide, showing the actual route she'd flown that night 6 months ago. This is how you do it. This is how you turn impossible into inevitable. As the class leaned forward, absorbing every detail, Walsh slipped into the back of the room and watched with quiet pride. After the lecture, he approached her with a flight manifest in his hands. "Got a mission request," he said. "Mountain rescue. Civilian climbers trapped by weather. Local SAR says conditions are too dangerous." Maya looked at the weather data. Challenging, risky, but not impossible. "Get the crew ready," she said. "We launch in 30. Walsh grinned. "Yes, ma'am, Phantom." As they walked toward the flight line together, the ghost flight pins on their uniforms catching the afternoon sun, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not peace, exactly. Not contentment. But purpose. Pure and undeniable. She was exactly where she needed to be. Doing exactly what she was meant to do. Flying into the dark so others could find their way home. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more military and veteran stories. These true tales keep the courage alive for generations to come. And in the comments, tell us where you are watching from and who's the quiet leader you'll never forget.